Why booked calls is a terrible metric and what you should be tracking instead. That's the episode of today's episode of the How to Make Money as a Creator podcast, episode number 21. If you don't know me, my name is Matthew Lakajev. I run a program called 7-Figure Creators, where we help creators make 6 then 7 figures. We've got about 435 people in our 6-Figure Creators program, and we just launched our 7-Figure Creators program. Last night I had the first group onboarding call, which I was super excited about. There's about 12 creators, and if you're on LinkedIn, you probably know all of them, but I'm not going to share who they are. So why book calls is a terrible metric and what to do instead. Now, I'm going to kind of rag on a little bit on the lead gen space right now in particular. On LinkedIn, there's kind of two camps right now. There's the copywriting inbound camp where people just get inbound leads from writing great copy. Then there's the outbound automation camp where people are like, hey, we're just going to set up these LinkedIn automations. We're going to use phantom busters, scrape the leads. We're going to shoot them some cold emails and we're going to get you booked calls. So I'm going to be a bit harsh on the booked calls people right now, not the copywriters for once. Now, what a lot of these book calls people do, or people who get into lead gen, right, is they'll watch a lot of videos, they'll understand and love the tech, they'll use tools like Clay and stuff like that, and they'll be like, cool. So they can write AI personalized emails. And so a classic thing that one of these organizations would do is someone posts content or they post a lead magnet post on LinkedIn, they get 1,000 comments, they scrape the leads, they run them through Clay, they find their emails, and then they automatically email them to essentially try and book them on a call. Now, the problem with that and then tracking booked calls as a metric is you can book calls with anyone. So I'll give you an example. I'll tell you how I could book 1,000 calls in a month if I want. If I ran this campaign, right, and all I did was in my outbound cold email say, hey, we're offering free 45-minute LinkedIn audits where we actually rebuild your profile with a designer on the call and we give you so much value. And that's what we do. We've done it for all these other people. It's usually a thing that's $500. I'm giving it away completely for free. See all these other people who've generated leads from it. If you want to book in a time, lock in a time here. If I did that right now, I would book 1,000 calls every month. But the problem is when I've gone through and booked these calls with people, they're not qualified. That's the fundamental biggest issue with so many of these automation companies. What they're doing is, sure, they can book you a lot of calls, but I can write an email right now that can book a call with anyone, especially if you have some authority on LinkedIn as well and if they follow you. The problem is I have no idea what their intent is. I have no idea where they are in the buying journey. I have no idea whether they work with other programs right now. I have no idea whether they're investing in LinkedIn. I have no idea whether they've just dumped heaps of money into their own cold email setup. I have no idea because I haven't qualified the prospect beforehand. And that's the biggest issue with all these email automations and all these like lead gen guys on LinkedIn, right? They don't qualify at all. So the metric for success, they'll say, I'm going to book you X amount of booked meetings per week. I could probably 5 times that if you want, but I'm just going to offer you away your time for free and make it something really valuable. And I'm not going to qualify the lead. So book calls is a terrible metric that you should be doing. The metric you should be tracking is booked qualified calls or qualified meetings. A qualified meeting is somebody who is actually interested in your thing, may potentially have the budget, it's in the right timing, you can implicate their pain from before, and they're looking to invest in something what you're doing. So there's different schools of thought around qualification methodologies. One of the old school ones is BANT. Do they have, the budget, the authority within the company? Do they have the need? And do they match up with the timeline? Like that's a classic one, but there's tons of other different qualification methodologies that you can use to see if someone might be ready to buy. But what you should be doing is you should be tracking qualified leads. That's why it's a really bad idea to just have your profile open for anyone to just book a time in your calendar without going through some sort of funnel or some sort of system. And I'm going to put a video out on that shortly as well on how to construct your LinkedIn funnel and how I've captured about 1,780 leads in the past 6 months alone, when most people don't even capture any because they have a calendar link. But you need to be tracking qualified meetings or qualified book calls. So you have to be really suspect when you chat to someone and say, we can get you this many book calls. But like you can get heaps of book calls if you just give something amazing away for free. The trick is if you're going to give something away for free, you have to make sure that the person is qualified. And then you have to make sure that you have a sales process that can deliver value during that initial meeting and then flip it into the other thing. That's why I'm not a fan of like any automation or email automation that goes out that immediately asks someone to book a meeting because you haven't qualified the prospect. You have no idea if they're a good fit. That's why I'm much more interested in reaching out and giving someone a lead magnet than having a conversation with the person either in LinkedIn or via email, asking about their pains, pulling on some threads and peeling back the onion and asking very specific questions like what inspired you to post on LinkedIn? How long have you been creating content and what tools do you use? What are your goals for LinkedIn? Oh, it sounds like you're trying to do this. Are you potentially looking for some help? Sure, you might be looking for some help. That's a semi-qualified call. Semi-qualified. That's not even fully qualified. So depending on the size of your sales team and how many meetings you can have and who you're reaching out to, that may be good enough to qualify to get somebody on a Zoom meeting or a quick phone call. But to even better qualify, if you've got limited time, you'd want to ask qualification questions around like, what's the biggest problem you're looking at trying to solve? How is this impacting the business? When are you looking, when have you been looking to get this solved and how much have you invested in it? And you're really peeling back the onion, or like, are you looking to really go hard in LinkedIn? There's many different qualification questions that you can ask because you want to find out, okay, is this person within the 3% of the market that's actually ready to buy now? And do I want to then meet with them? So it actually completely depends on the size of your sales team. If you've got a sales team, how much time you've got on your calendar, completely depends. Like if you're someone who's first starting out on LinkedIn and you can't get any meetings, you should be offering the greatest free stuff of mankind and filling your calendar up with 40 hours of clients that maybe even won't pay you because at the moment you actually suck at what you do. But after you spend 40 hours a week helping people and you do that over and over again, you become really good. And then you'll have the conviction to actually want to work with people. So book calls is a terrible metric. It should be booked qualified calls. So if you're going to go to a lead gen company, that's what you need to go through. Is the lead qualified? And if they tell you, yeah, it's qualified because they're your ideal potential client. You said it was accountants, 11 to 50 in Sydney. I booked a call with them. That's not qualified. Qualified is checking if they have budget, need, authority, and timeline and asking specific questions to implicate the pain to understand if they're in the right fit for the solution right now. That's a qualified meeting. So guys, when you're tracking, booked calls is not the metric you should be tracking. You should be tracking booked qualified calls. And I promise if you start doing this, because if you're one of the hundreds of people I've chatted to in the DMs saying, yeah, I've booked 10 meetings this month, but none of them closed, it's because they weren't qualified meetings. So you weren't actually booking meetings. And that means your strategy is wrong. And you're kind of like, you're being hoodwinked by all these automation people and it's not that they're doing the wrong thing essentially because they just don't know what they don't know because they haven't spent time in sales. They're only in lead generation, right? If you spent time in sales, people would laugh about it. They would say, it's not even qualified. What do you mean? And that's like, if you go into software sales, I'll give you kind of this like how it's structured in, say, software sales. In software sales, you can be an account executive who's a salesperson. And then there's people who are SDRs or BDRs. Those people are people who usually book the meetings for the salespeople. But for the meeting to count as part of the person's target, the SDR or BDR, it has to be a qualified meeting. They can't just book meetings. So back when I was at Zoom, when I was in the commercial team and we had SDRs and BDRs, or when I was an SDR or BDR, I had to make sure, and the team I had to work with, make sure that when we book the meeting, it's actually qualified because the salesperson on the other side has to say when they meet the person, okay, this is a qualified meeting. I'm going to move them to stage 2 in the CRM, and that's okay. You get your commission. But if you book heaps of meetings for the salesperson that aren't qualified, they're going to hate you because you're wasting their time. So you're kind of, by just booking these random calls, you're just wasting your time. But you're not doing it because you didn't know, but like you're wasting your time. And then the people telling you about this are just like more book calls. But if you have all these book calls and you're not closing deals, there's a whole bunch of other issues that you've got to sort out during your process. And there's a reason why you book calls, because if you book 10, you should be at least closing one, we close like 40% in WhatsApp because we have a good sales process and qualification process. But yeah, book calls be really suspect when you see that that's a metric. Ask if it's qualified. And then when someone says, yeah, it's qualified, you say, how do you qualify it? And just ask a few questions deep. Use ChatGPT beforehand to ask what a qualified meeting is and ask them questions. Okay, what do you consider a qualification? And if they tell you they fit within your lead category, that's not a qualified lead. It has to be, or a qualified meeting. People have to answer specific questions to actually get there. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm just trying to get a watch out because I've seen this a lot where, there's a skill in automations and setting up, and it is really good when it works well. But there's also another skill of when you start a conversation with someone that you need to ask questions to qualify them before you're going to want a meeting. Otherwise, you might be like some people I've chatted to who've had like 30 meetings over 2 months and none of them closed, but it's just because people were jumping in because they wanted some free value. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to rate 5 stars if you found it 5 stars as well. Otherwise, I'll see you on the LinkedIn platform.